So today that's what we want to talk about, but it's really an introduction. It's an introduction on data analysis using qualitative research methodologies. It's also an introduction, first and foremost, obviously, on data collection using qualitative research methodologies. I think you were discussing questionnaires a while ago, so that's in the realm mainly of quantitative research methodologies, but it can also apply to a certain extent in qualitative research methodologies. But the focus for today is the collection and analysis of data using qualitative research methodologies. And always remember that qualitative research methodology is one methodology. There is quantitative research methodologies, which are a second research methodology. Then there is a third methodology which combines both the quantitative and the qualitative, which gives you your mixed methods research strategies, okay? And as we said earlier on, I think if you want to go the route of mixed method research, it's a little bit cumbersome. It's a little bit demanding. It's not to say that it cannot be done. It can be done. And in fact, most theorists, most practitioners in research say if you combine the two research methods, you are more likely to get closer to finding the truth of what you are looking for in terms of your research or your research study or your research practice. But like I said last time, I don't really encourage people to do that unless if you've got very strong quantitative and very strong qualitative research method skills, then you can go that route, okay? So this is what we want to do. First of all, obviously, we want to recap the way in which we structure our questions, the nature of qualitative research methods, sampling in qualitative research methods. I think this is a big chunk of it. And most of us have got problems in terms of doing sampling in research, in qualitative research methodology. So we'll spend a little bit more time on that. And then data collection in qualitative research methods. There is quite a lot that's written. There are quite a number of authors who talk from different perspectives about collection of data using qualitative research methodologies. As I was preparing this lecture, I found it to be very, very interesting, the various ways that you can use to collect data using qualitative research methodologies. And then interpretation of data and triangulation. We will not be talking about triangulation a lot this afternoon because I think the other stuff on data collection there's a lot of stuff that we need to cover. Then the conceptual and theoretical work. Like I said last time, I think at this stage, you ought to have a theoretical perspective that you say to yourself, this theoretical perspective helps me to explain phenomena in my own area of study. For instance, what is your area? What are you studying? Policing under forensic investigation. So by now, she should have a theory or a number of theories or a theoretical framework that helps you to understand phenomena in the field of policing. In other words, by now she should have a lens. She should have a theoretical lens. She should have a conceptual lens that she can use to be able to understand phenomena in her field. And ma'am, what's your field? Internal auditing, yeah. By now you should have a theoretical framework or a conceptual schema or a conceptual framework that helps you to understand issues in auditing. So that you can say to yourself, if I want to look at the world of auditing, this is the lens that I'm going to use. Your lens may be different from mine. Your lens may be different from his. Depending on where you are coming from, remember we mentioned two words last time. Remember where you're coming from in terms of your knowledge base. your epistemology, where you are coming from epistemologically, and the other one, which starts with the O, your ontology. In other words, your philosophical position. Where are you coming from philosophically, and where are you coming from epistemologically? So that helps you to have a particular theoretical framework that you then use to look at phenomena. For example, my friend here, Teboho, he is very interested in issues of communication. He's very interested in issues of politics. So he obviously has a theoretical framework that he uses to look at politics, or to look at communication, or to look at language, for instance. I mean, if he's talking to people about the whole issue of language of learning and language of teaching, he already has a perspective from a particular knowledge base, from a particular epistemological position, and from a particular philosophical position, which is his ontological position. So that's very, very important as we go forward. So remember that in qualitative research processes, the logic of reasoning is one in which theory is generated from the process. I think that's a fundamental, is this my water? No, okay, thank you. Thank you very much. We are saying in the qualitative research process, the logic of reasoning, how you reason, how you think about going to do research, how you take yourself in the process of research, the basis of that logic of reasoning, we are saying, is inductive. Okay, it's the inductive logic of reasoning. I think this is very, very important to remember, because once you understand that your logic of reasoning in the qualitative research methodology is inductive, because you generate theory from the process of research. The purpose for a qualitative research methodology is to generate theory from the research process. Whereas the opposite of the inductive logic, which is what? The deductive logic, is that you start from a theory, because you start from a hypothesis. So these are very different research methodologies, and even the way you reach, the way you get to your results is very different. So in terms of a recap, we need to understand that we refer to this process as the inductive logic of reasoning. And I think as researchers, you really need to have a very good grasp and understanding of the differences between the two. So when you combine the two in a mixed method research, so in one aspect of your research process, you are trying to build theory from the research. In another one, you are starting already from a theory that is out there. So you want to prove whether that theory is correct or that theory is right, and whether you can generalize to similar populations. That's your deductive logic, okay? And we are saying the quantitative research process, we conduct research with reference to hypotheses. So the issue of hypotheses is critical. Don't feel that there's something wrong with you if even up to this stage you are still finding it very difficult to understand what a hypothesis is. It took me probably 3 to 5 years to understand what a hypothesis is. I attended research methods classes, taught research methods classes, but it took me some time to understand what a hypothesis is. So the only way out is for you to read and to practice in setting out your hypotheses, okay, especially in quantitative research methods. So we are saying in the quantitative research process, we conduct research with reference to hypotheses and ideas inferred from theory. That's an important distinction. Ideas are inferred from theory. Ideas come from theory. We borrow our ideas from a particular theory or from a particular theoretical perspective. We borrow our ideas from a theory that other people have developed. We borrow our ideas from a theory that other people have used, or theories that other people have used. But always remember, you pick a theory because the theory helps you to understand phenomena in auditing, in policing, in communication, in HR. That's how you get to your theory. And always say, ask yourself the questions and say, In terms of its knowledge base, does this theory help me to understand phenomena in human resources? In terms of its philosophical basis, does it help me to understand phenomena in HR? So you must always ask yourself those questions. So I thought, we could use that as a basis for starting where we want to go today. I like this book. I don't know how much it is, but I think it's a little bit expensive. Some of us are still very, very young, so we don't like to read things that are because you can get all these books as an e-book. But I don't like an e-book because I like to write in the book. I want to color the book. I want to dog-ear the book. But if you buy an e-book is a lot cheaper. But I'm going to ask Chris. I don't see where Chris is. Is he here today? Okay, he's not in here. Yeah. I think we need to probably ask the library to buy more of these books for our colleagues, so that you can go and borrow the books, or we can put them on reserve or something like that. Okay, but you'll find this in most books. So here are the main steps to a qualitative research methodology. You state the background to your study, the background to auditing or auditing small to medium enterprises, the background to policing in townships, your background to the study. You emphasize the significance of the study. Why is this study so important? Why is studying auditing of small to medium enterprises important? Why is it important? Is it because of the Auditor General, or because you want to make sure that people can run their small businesses properly? So you need to emphasize why is that study important. You need to tell us what is the aim of the study. It's your broad idea of why you want to do this study. Remember, this is just a recap, ladies and gentlemen. What is the aim of your study? Okay? You want to state your objectives. You want to state your objectives. Prof. Molloy always says, when you state your objectives, remember to state them in a behavioral form. Remember to state them in a behavioral form. Okay? Because if you don't state them in a behavioral form, then they don't mean much. Okay? And we always say your objectives, the moment you have got more than 5 objectives, that study is not doable. The moment you've got more than 5 objectives, that study is not doable. 3 to 5, that's fine. But the moment you have more, because some people even go and say main objective, sub-objective, I don't like that, but if your supervisor likes that, that's fine. But just have 5 objectives, full stop, that's done, and you proceed, you go forward, okay? And we are saying, indicate the general research questions. Indicate the general research questions. What are your research questions? What are your research questions? And your research questions have got to be linked to the aim of the study. Your research questions have got to be linked to the objectives of the study. That's how you get to your research questions. Okay, that's how you get your research questions. And not the delimitation of the study. She is studying policing in a township. She is studying auditing in small to medium enterprises. My friend Cheku is studying human resources in a university of technology. You must limit your study. You can't be all over the place, okay?
Sorry, Bob, before you proceed, again here, I think you just mentioned earlier, is it aims before questions or questions before aims?
Let's hear what people think. Is it aims before questions or questions before aims? Yes, ma'am?
I think it's questions before aims, because the question is the research questions are with your background or introduction somewhere where you ask the questions, then the aim comes and says, this is what I want to do.
Okay, someone else? Yes, ma'am? The aim should come first. Yes, someone else? Yes?
I think the aim is like a vision.
It comes first.
It comes first because it demarcates
Yes.
a bit more broadly
Okay?
the study.
Yeah. Yes, sir?
I think both of them.
There's somebody who says both of them, okay?
Why I'm saying I have to explain myself.
A plain, yeah, okay, go ahead.
I think it depends with the structure from your department, how they do it, or also the structure from the supervisor.
Okay, thank you.
The supervisor can prefer to have your aims before your questions. Another one can say, okay, I prefer to have questions before aims.
Okay.
It depends on I think.
That's fine, thank you.
But I think it goes back to you find a gap, right? Then you ask a question about what about the gap do you want to do? Then your aim comes in. That's how I understand it.
Okay. Go ahead, sir.
My view was maybe like you've got your problem statement. After delineating your problem statement, then you can derive questions from your problem statement. Then you come with the aim.
Okay. Yes, ma'am. Yeah, motivate your position.
Why I'm saying the aim, I just want to give an example, a simple example of a vision and mission of an institution. You cannot just start with objectives if you don't know what is it that you're aiming to do with this institution. So the objectives will emanate from the aims.
Okay. Okay. So I think we are split in the middle. We are split in the middle. I am very comfortable with coming up with the aim of the study and my purpose statement. I'm very comfortable with that so that I can derive my questions, my research questions from the aim. So that once I have my aim, I can then say the objectives are and the questions. But I think what you need to do is you need to read as many research books as is possible. How many? How many? I think I would suggest about 5 to 10. And you see what they are saying in auditing, what they are saying in policing, okay? What they are saying in human resources, what they are saying in art. But read at least about 5 or 10. I brought, these are my own Bibles that I read. Don't feel those of us that are Christian. This is very good. This is very good. I think when Prof. Molloy was talking about these things, you often hear she talks about your purpose statement. She talks about your purpose statement. Cresswell talks a lot about the importance of your purpose statement. And what is it that you want to focus on as well, okay? But this is mainly on education, but most of the concepts will apply to different disciplines, okay? Don't forget, we also gave you a very old book by Barbie, The Practice of Social Research. Okay? There's also Kellinger, Quantitative Research Methods. And for those of you that are doing business studies, there are quite a number of books in business studies that you can use for both quantitative and qualitative research. But most people that write in business, they prefer quantitative research methodologies. Okay? So where are we? I prefer to say the aim of this study is to investigate the prevalence of HIV/AIDS among 20-year-old girls and men at the Vaal University of Technology. The objectives of this study are to find out whether it is behavior that they pick up on campus or a behavior that they bring from home that is responsible for the high rate of HIV infection. Okay? That's the way I would go about it. Okay? The aim of this study is to investigate the high failure rates in engineering with a particular reference to engineering drawing. The first objective of this study is to try and examine whether the lack of geometry teaching at grade 12 is responsible for the low performance of the children. Number 2, the study will also try to investigate whether it is the teaching methods that are used in teaching mathematics at grade 12 that are responsible, etc., etc. Okay? But I think you should read extensively, okay? So you see, this is why it is important to recap. It is important to always go back and back to these issues. The more you go back and back to them, the better you begin to understand them. And like I keep saying, talk to yourself. There's nothing wrong in talking to yourself after you close the door and you look into the mirror. Okay? Choose and select your site or a sites of data collection. You have to choose appropriately and make sure that these sites of data collection that you're choosing, for instance, my friend who's doing HR, his site of data collection is this university. He may want to compare maybe 2 UOTs, and he has to justify why his sites of data collection are TUT and VUT. He needs to justify that, whether it is because of what they teach, or whether it is because student population, or whether it is because of when they all became UOTs. But you have to justify why you choose them, okay? And then we're saying, collect data. Plan this carefully because time is not on your side. The one thing that you do not have is time. The one thing that you do not have is time. So you need to plan your study properly. So this is just for a purpose of us going back, okay? So we're saying, indicate the general research question, not the delimitation of the study. Choose and select your sites or sites of data collection. Collect data, plan this carefully because time is not on your side. So you need to plan your things properly, okay? Then interpret your data. Sorry, that word is not spelled properly. Conceptual and theoretical framework, development of grounded theory. So you notice, I think what distinguishes a master's research project from a BTech research project is the sophistication in your conceptual framework. Some people refer to a conceptual framework as a conceptual schema, okay? It is the sophistication in your conceptual schema. But for you to have a certain degree of sophistication, because the more sophisticated it is, the more robust it is in terms of helping you to understand the phenomena that you are studying, whether it is auditing, whether it is HR, whether it is art. The more robust it is, the better it is in terms of helping you to understand what you want to do, okay? We will be talking a lot about grounded theory. Grounded theory is part of which logic of reasoning? Grounded theory is part of which logic of reasoning? The inductive logic. The inductive logic, because put simply, you are trying to come from the bottom up to develop a theory. You are trying to come from the bottom up to develop a conceptual schema. You are trying to come up from the bottom up to develop a conceptual framework. So this is germane to the qualitative research method, and in particular the inductive logic of reasoning. Writing up your findings, your conclusions, and recommendations. Writing up your findings, your conclusions, and your recommendations. And then you are done. It's very simple. It's not sophisticated at all. Okay? It's not demanding it. Yes, Prof?
I think you missed one. After data collection, you just missed one thing.
After
Data
up.
collection.
Up. Sorry?
6, line 6.
There.
Collected data and then next slide, we talk about something between that and the next slide.
Okay. Yeah, you need to obviously analyze your data. Okay. Yeah, you need to analyze your data. Thank you. You need to analyze your data. But the reason I put that is that you need to continually go back on your own. You need to continually, so that these things, you begin to understand them not by reading, but they are there already. Then they are etched in your memory, okay? So we are saying different styles in research. So it's your naturalistic, qualitative, and ethnographic research. Somebody the other day asked us about phenomenology and ethnographic, okay? So today we'll answer that question for you. Today we'll answer the question, what is ethnography? What is phenomenology, okay? And like I said last time, if you cannot pronounce phenomenology, you go home, you lock your bedroom, you look into the mirror, and you pronounce phenomenology, okay? And we are saying, you've got your historical and documentary research, you've got your case studies, you've got your meta-analysis research, synthesis, and systematic reviews. All these are different types of research. You've got your action research. It's very popular. Action research is very popular. You've got your surveys, your longitudinal, your cross-sectional and trend studies. These are obviously in the realm of quantitative research methodology. Okay? And you've got your experiments, your quasi-experiments, your single case research, and internet-based research studies or experiments. Okay? And you've got your ex post facto research. Okay? So you've got quite a number. You've got quite a number of research methods or research styles that you can adopt. You've got quite a number of research styles or research methods that you can adopt. But I want to repeat. How do you choose a research methodology? How do you choose a research methodology? How do you choose a research approach? It is the inductive logic of reasoning or the deductive logic of reasoning. Where are you coming from? Are you interested in developing theory? Are you interested in proving other people's theory wrong or right? That's how you choose your research methodology. Does that make sense, ladies and gentlemen? I think that's an important beginning statement. Are you interested in developing your own theory, which applies to a particular case of small to medium enterprises as far as auditing is concerned? Or is she concerned with using a theory out there that already exists in terms of proving that theory about the existence or the profitability of small to medium enterprises? Does that make sense? So we need to understand the logic of reasoning, whether it is inductive or deductive. Okay? I think these two concepts are very, very critical for this. Okay? That's the source. That's where I got this from. But you can get this from many, many books. So let's just do naturalistic, qualitative, and ethnographic. Okay? That's very common for people that are interested in understanding, how reality is socially constructed. Okay? How do managers of small to medium enterprise construct their realities of making profit in SMEs? Okay? This lady is interested in policing. If she does a naturalist, this one here, an ethnographic one, she wants to know how reality is constructed by policewomen and policemen when they do their jobs, or how they interact with people. Okay? Historical, we all know what history is all about. Action research is very, very famous. Most people do action research because they're interested in transformation issues. Most people do action research because they're interested in issues of power, ideology. They're interested in issues of power, ideology, even issues of race and issues of gender, or even issues of sexuality. Okay? Most people do case studies because they're interested in this particular case, studying the HR at the VUT. That's his main focus. Most people are interested in doing surveys because then you want to work with very huge sets of data. Longitudinal surveys, you want to track boys from a particular school in Sharpeville. So you want to track them from year 1, year 2, year 3, year 4. From 2017, 2018, 2019, 2020. So you want to track them for 4 years and see whether doing well at grade 12 is a predictive validity that these boys and girls will actually do better in engineering or in applied science or in computer science. So it's a longitudinal study. So you do it over a long period of time. Does that make sense? Okay? Your meta-analysis, I mean, this is where you use sophisticated statistical methods to begin to really understand what's happening in large sets of data. I think this is what he has taught or will be teaching you in terms of how you do your meta-analysis, and there are different statistical programs that you can use for that. But nowadays, your life is much, much easier because you can use SPSS, and it helps you to crunch your numbers, and it comes out the other end. Okay? So that's it for that. The other stuff you can look up. Okay, a question?
How do you then decide which
Excellent question. How do you come up with a research method that suits your own style? Like I said earlier on, what helps you to understand social phenomena? What helps you to understand physical phenomena? What helps you to understand the world? Are you interested in looking at the world by coming through what others have written, their theories? Are you interested in looking at the world of visual art, for instance, to come through the theories that other people have come up with? Or are you interested in looking at visual arts, you start on your own ground? I mean, I was watching BBC this morning, and there's a Japanese person who has come up with art to try to help us to understand what infinity is. Especially those of us that are not scientists. I mean, it's very difficult for me to understand what infinity is. But this artist from Japan has got pumpkins, has got flowers, put in a room with light to understand, for us to help us understand what infinity is. So if I want to study him, I can take two positions. I can say, I want to study the theory of infinity first before I go and study what he does. Or no, I want to go and interview this person. I want to go and observe him and work with him and understand how he comes up with his theories. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I hear you, but I'm trying to understand in a sense whereby obviously it's art-based, right? And obviously it will be action. Then how do you then select from all these stuff that you have displayed there? Because now I'm thinking everything that, like I'm thinking back in my mind, like everything that you said there, it fits in, like I can use all these things within my study. Then how do I then select which one is?
Again, excellent question. Again, excellent question. I mean, let us pick one. You can do a historical study of the development of art. You know, you'll see somewhere in the slides. I mean, my favorite person is Peter Ngubane. We all know who Peter Ngubane was? Who was he, ma'am?
The one who's got the shorts on 1976.
Say that again.
Who's got the shorts on 1976 issues?
Okay. The one who has got the shots on 1976 issues. Someone else? Who is Peter Ngubane? Pardon? When did he start doing his photography? Yeah, in the 60s. In the 60s. In the 60s, or probably early 60s. Those of us that used to read Drum magazine in the 60s, the pictures that he was bringing out, then, you know, they were telling a story about what was happening in this country. Okay? So if I want to do, I can do a historical study. Okay? I can still do a case, I can still do a case study of Peter Ngubane and his photography and his artwork. But the question is, which of these research methodologies will help me to understand phenomena? It's an excellent question. It's an excellent question for the reason I'm going to say right now. Those of us that do research from a quantitative perspective, those of us that do research from a quantitative perspective, we say that we come from the premise that says reality exists out there independent of me. Reality exists out there independent of me. So these colleagues who come from that perspective, there's no space here. Is there? Yeah, thank you, Chris. Those of us that say reality exists independently of us, what do we call them? What do we call them? It starts with a P. Yes, positivists. Positivism. You know, you can put simply, but that's not quite correct. Objectivism. Okay? Because they believe that reality exists independent of me. So for them to come to the truth, you need large data sets. You need hundreds, thousands of data sets. I mean, some of these people, for instance, when they are looking at issues of HIV/AIDS at a prenatal clinic, you know, they study not one person. They study hundreds of women going to that clinic. But if I want to do a case study, because I just want to understand how this happens, I study only one, because I just want to focus on this person, on this particular case, understand it deeper, so that I can begin to understand how people construct reality. So the opposite of that would be constructionism. Okay, but you'll come back to the inductive and the deductive logic. That's where you'll come back to. And that should guide you. Okay? But you have got so many that you are confronted with. So your question is, how do you choose one? Which one helps you to understand phenomena better? Okay?
Or even, Prof, can I add and say the objectives that she would have made? Right now you have this task, but then this is the question that I pose. What is the tool that can best answer this question? Can you help me to eliminate the others? I don't know.
Yeah. But that's why always remember to go back. What is it that you're trying to achieve? What is it that you're trying to achieve? Okay, Prof, go ahead.
And the other thing, she cannot say she's interested in all of them, because if she were to use them, she'd never complete this. Many years.
There you are. But let's go back. Go back. What helps me to understand this phenomena? What helps me to understand the problem? What, are you doing a master's or a PhD? Yeah, if you're doing a PhD, then the question you should ask, what helps me to understand this problematic? Because when you refer to it as a problematic, it's much deeper and it's much broader. So what helps you understand that? Okay, is it through the inductive logic or the deductive logic? Is it through a case study? Is it through a historical survey? Is it through an ethnography? What helps you to understand? Okay. And you need in the process, obviously, to choose a theory. Okay? Are we together, colleagues? Good. Thank you. Okay. What is the starting point in data collection? Whom are you going to study? Or what is it that you're going to study? That's the starting point. What is it that you're going to study? What is it that you want to study? Do you want to study black people that own SMEs? Do you want to study women that own SMEs? Do you want to study very wealthy people that own SMEs? Whom do you want to study? That's the starting point. Or what is it that you want to study? For instance, that lady, she wants to study art. She wants to study art. And what kind of art does she want to study? Does she want to study art that's coming from the townships? Does she want to study art that's coming from people that are wealthy? Do you want to study art that is, people that use rock to come up with art? Or that use clay? I've just learned now there are some people that use ice to do art. They use ice. Is that what? Or people that use wood? Is that what you want to study? Wood carvings as a form of art? Okay? So what is it that you want to study? That's the starting point. Why are you going to study? What are you going to study a particular individual, case, or a group? I'm sure at some stage Professor Moloi keeps talking to you about the central phenomenon. About the central phenomenon. Colleagues, because I'm much, much younger than most of you in this room, the word phenomenon, if you don't understand it, go to your dictionary or Google it so that you really understand what is phenomenon and what is phenomena and why that is important in terms of research. And I'm serious. Go Google it so that you really understand it. For you to be able to understand what I'm saying, I don't want you to say it loud. Try to define phenomenon on your own right now in your mind. You find most of us are stammering. Most of us are stammering, okay? So I'm saying go Google it, go to a dictionary and check what is phenomena, what is a phenomenon. Because an understanding of phenomena and phenomenon is very critical and central to research and what we do. And how do you choose a group to study? How are you going to choose that group to study? But we've already answered that question now. We've already answered that question now. What determines it is your logic of reasoning, where you're coming from, okay? The essence of purposive sampling in qualitative research methods. Okay? The essence of purposive sampling in qualitative research methods. So that's where we are going. Okay? How do you choose what to study? And how do you get to say, this is what I want to study? Okay? So we've already been introduced, I'm sure, to purposive sampling. Its main sampling procedure used in qualitative research methods. Purposive sampling is the main sampling procedure that is used in qualitative research methods. If you read a lot of dissertations, some people say, I'm going to use purposive sampling, full stop. You can't. You have to explain what you're talking about. Okay? Can I just pause? Are we together on that slide? Any question on that slide? Okay, it means we all understand what we're talking about. Thank you. In quantitative research methodology, sampling revolves around probability sampling. In quantitative research methodology, sampling revolves around probability sampling. We won't be talking about that today. That's for another day, and that's for what my colleague over there probably has been talking about. It's probability sampling. Okay? And in qualitative research, it revolves around purposive sampling. You have to do your sampling, you have to justify your sampling, and you have to understand your sampling procedure so that you can be able to defend the sample that you use. Okay? Whether it is police in a small police station, whether it is managers in a small to medium enterprises, or whether it is people in the HR department in the VUT. He has to explain to us his sampling procedure for picking just this particular group of people within HR in this institution. Okay. Sampling is the selection of units of study. It is the selection of your unit of study. Remember, we said earlier on, research is disciplined inquiry. Research is disciplined inquiry. Research is science. What makes it science, it is because then you begin to delineate what your units of study are, what your units of analysis are, what your units of recommendation are. And you have to keep going to what is the central phenomenon that you are studying. Are we together on that one? Sampling is the selection of units of study. It could be people, it could be students, it could be academics, it could be a university or universities, it could be a school, it could be a hospital, it could be artists. Okay? What are you studying on, ma'am? What are you doing, ma'am? Social entrepreneurship. So, social entrepreneurship, your unit of study could be entrepreneurs.
But we're going to study students.
You're going to study students, yes. I think you should Google a book entitled Making Profits Out of the Poor. Making Profits Out of the Poor. Okay? It was a bestseller at one point. I think it's Pahad who wrote that book. Not our own Pahad, another Pahad. But that's the title, Making Profits Out of the Poor. It's on social entrepreneurship. Okay? Because social entrepreneurship nowadays is a new term, is a new view of doing things. Okay? All right. So sampling is the selection of units of study, such as people, such as students, such as academics, such as a university, such as a school, such as a hospital, and in her case, the people that do, small to medium enterprises. What are you doing, sir? Fine arts as well. So it could be artists, it could be student doing art, or it could be people that do art. Okay? And say, what are you doing? What's your son?
English poetry.
English poetry. Yes. He may want to study Africans that write English poetry. Okay? He may want to compare Keats to a famous African poet, for instance. So that becomes a case study. It can even become a historical study as well. Okay. Say, what are you doing? What is your study on?
Visual arts.
Visual arts. Okay, I think there are more people in visual arts. I think they are oppressing us in this room. Okay. Say, what is yours? Pardon? Policing as well. Okay. So you need to delineate what your unit of study is. Is it police, or is it a particular phenomenon such as violence? I mean, we all know that on Friday evening, most of the people that die through accidents, either being shot or being killed in a car accident or in a gang violence in this country, it happens on a Friday night. So those of you that have got teenagers, lock them in on Friday night. Don't allow them to get out. Let them go out on Saturday and on Sunday, but on Friday night, lock, because it has been proved that most people get killed on Friday night. Okay, thank you. So we can go to the next one. So the starting point for purposive sampling is obviously your research questions. The way you structure your research questions. And remember, there's a science to structuring a research question. You don't just ask a research question. Hence the debate we had, what comes first, your aim or your research question? Okay? So that debate is very important because your research questions are critical. Your units to be samples, e.g. students, the samples that you want to use. In this particular case, it's art, it's HR, it's small to medium enterprises, it's social entrepreneurs, etc., etc. Okay? Guidelines on units of analysis. So we are saying the starting point of purposive sampling is your guidelines on units of analysis. What is your unit of analysis? What is your central phenomenon? Or what are the units of analysis that you are going to use? Okay? In terms of your data. And we are also saying, what are these? Are they students? Are they men? Are they women? What are they? Are they pieces of art? What are these? Okay? I think we've got a number of people that are doing visual art. When I watch news, I see very little of local art. Is it because the people that do these programs are not very interested in our own local art, or they're interested in art from elsewhere? So I'm very happy that there are quite a number of people that are going to do research on art so that eventually you can produce even books and articles. So is this chart clear? Are we together? Because you really need to, when you talk about purposive sampling, you need to come out very clear what you mean. Okay? Different types of purposive sampling. There are different types. Theoretical sampling, and you need to understand that. Generic purposive sampling, you need to understand that. Snowball sampling, you need to understand that. Sorry. So there are different ways that you can do purposive sampling. You can do it, it can be theoretical sampling, it can be generic purposive sampling, and it can be a snowball sampling. Okay? For you to be able to understand, these terms, you need to read at least 3 or 4 different books, okay? I know some of you will say, but that's too much, I just need to read one book. There's no way you can understand this stuff by reading just one book. Because remember, the people that write, they also write from different epistemological and ontological perspectives. We may even add that they write from different ideological perspectives. Okay? We may even add and say their race is also important when they write. I hope everybody in this room, you have read the book by Ngugi wa Thiong'o or James Ngugi, Decolonizing the Mind. If you haven't read it, even if you are doing small to medium enterprises, ma'am, or even if you are my friend who's doing visual arts, I think you should read it because it helps you to understand. So we are saying people can write from a particular knowledge base, people write from a particular philosophical base, people write from a particular racial base, people write from a particular ideological base, and people write from a particular gender base. And what?
From
from intelligence. Yes, that's true. But people also write from a particular gender base. I mean, yesterday, I don't know whether Teboho remembers, we were in a session yesterday, and one young woman stood up, and she made a passionate critique of what we're talking about. Why? Because she is gay. So the lens that she uses to look at phenomena is the lens of a lesbian or somebody who is gay. So nowadays, people write from the perspective of their own sexuality, from the perspective of their gender, from the perspective of their ideology, or from their perspective of their class. Remember my famous song, my mother was a washerwoman and my father was a garden boy? That's a class position or an ideological position. And then obviously your knowledge base and your philosophy. So, there are about 6-7 ways that people write from. There are about 6-7 lenses that people use to write. Okay, I think this is very important. I've always wanted to find a way of letting you understand. If somebody says, critique this paper, if somebody says, critique this paper that was written, or critique this piece of art, what are the units that you're going to use to critique that piece of art? I want to check who drew the picture. Was it a woman? Was she black? What class was she? What ideology was she writing from? What knowledge base was she writing from? What philosophical base was she writing from? So once you know all that, you are able to critique a paper. Does that make sense? Yeah, you are able to critique a paper. So if you ask me to critique what she's writing, I can just read her introduction and I can tell you, no, this lady is coming from this particular philosophical position and I don't like it, I don't agree with her. Or no, this lady is coming from this particular ideological perspective, I don't like it and I don't agree with her. Or I like it and I agree with her. Or this person is writing from a particular sexual position, which means she's gay or he's lesbian. I don't know whether we say a man is lesbian. Okay, I'm not sure. I've messed up my comments. But that's what we are talking about, okay? So we have got a question. You had a question, ma'am?
I know, Prof, I was just remembering this morning we talked about snowball sampling. And that was in quantitative. And I was just wondering if there is a difference with snowball sampling in qualitative.
No. It was in qualitative. Sorry, it was in qualitative.
In qualitative.
Yeah, it was
I thought I saw.
No.
Okay.
Quantitative was on top, qualitative was at the bottom.
Excellent. Okay. So you see, these things keep coming up. The repetition is essential because we repeat, so you understand them. The only way you can understand them is that when you go home after I finish, looking after everybody else that needs to be looked at after, you go back to these two presentations, the morning one and the afternoon one. And
But also with snowball sample, it would never work in quantitative because the sample is just there and then it goes away.
Okay.
And it would be so small.
Yeah. Okay. And here what she's saying, the sample will be so small. The sample will be so small because in quantitative research, you are coming from a particular theory and you want to prove or disprove a hypothesis. But for you to be able to do that, you need a large sample. Remember, you then begin to say, is this significant with certain degrees of freedom? Okay. Or let us suppose you are doing a one-way analysis, an ANOVA. You cannot do an ANOVA with five units of analysis. Okay, you can't. You have to do a very large sample. Okay, yes?
Please go back to that slide of sampling. May you please explain the theoretical engineering?
It's coming. Theoretical sampling is coming. Okay. Theoretical sampling is coming. Okay. Are we together with snowball sampling? Okay. Good, thank you. Theoretical sampling. General research questions. sample theoretically, collect data, analyze data, theoretical saturation. I like that one, theoretical saturation. That you have done your stuff, you have read your theoretical perspective, you have done every theory that you can to understand the phenomenon that you're studying, and you're convinced that there is what they call theoretical saturation. Okay? Generate hypotheses. Okay? There you are. Sorry. I think we have our diagram complete. Okay? There is your, when we talk theoretical sampling, we are talking about the way you go about this schematically, the way you go about this mentally. What is the mental process that you go through? Okay? And go back to the first thing that I talked about, that research is disciplined inquiry. What makes it a science? What makes it a science is the way we construct the whole entire research process. So when we think about sampling theoretically, it's the thought process where you talk about your research questions, is where you think about your research methods of how you do the sampling, and we've already agreed that it's purposive sampling. Okay. It's when you close your eyes and then begin to think about your research, so that you're not shooting from the hip, or you're not being like a journalist, who is, for a journalist, it's just a hunch, whether there's corruption or no corruption. Okay, well, he or she may want to look for evidence. Okay, are we together? Let us pause. Let us pause. Let us pause. Yes, please.
For example, when I was doing my own research, the theory that I had in mind was on a learning organization. So theoretically sampling, I then wanted to select those participants who would be able to illustrate what a learning organization was, because I had that theory in my mind.
Yeah. So we can say, she's saying, I had that theory in mind, but we know she was coming from a particular epistemological and ontological perspective regarding the learning organization. For instance, she was doing the school as a learning organization. So she came from a particular epistemological and ontological perspective, but she had a thought process when she was doing the research to come up with whatever she was interested in as far as the school as a learning organization. Okay, any other question? Any other question? Because this is important. Okay, thank you. Okay, when does sampling occur? When does sampling occur? When does it occur? Before data collection. Remember what she was saying now? That I had my own thought, I had my own theory about learning organization, and I wanted to talk to people that could see the learning organization in that particular perspective. The school as a learning organization. Okay? For those of us that are studying organizations, there's somebody called Bertel Nafi, the social psychology of organizations. The social psychology of organization. Okay, I think you should read that. But now there's so much stuff written on the social psychology of organization. What is the purpose? To develop many perspectives about the research question. What is the purpose? To develop many perspectives about the research questions. Why 40-year-old black academics are not publishing, for instance. Okay? We refer to this process as maximal variation sample, to develop many perspectives. That development of many perspectives, we call it maximal variation sampling. Okay? To develop many perspectives about the school as a learning organization. We are all familiar with the notion of a university as a learning organization and the school as a learning organization. Even the family, I'm sure, can be a learning organization as well. Because you learn from your external environment and you learn from an internal environment. you import and export energy. Because if you don't import or export energy, you get negative entropy. And when you get negative entropy, you die or you atrophy. Okay? To describe a case that illustrates dramatically the situation you are researching. To describe a case that illustrates dramatically the situation you are researching. For instance, I could be discussing failure rate in mathematics among engineering students from township schools. Let's go back. To describe a case that illustrates dramatically the situation that I want to research, such as the failure rate in mathematics among engineering students from township schools. We refer to this process as critical sampling. To describe a case that illustrates dramatically the situation that I am researching. Okay? Let's pause. Question? Let's pause. Question? Let us pause and a question. But it is important that we understand the two: maximal variation sampling, critical sampling. Okay? When does sampling occur? It occurs first because the purpose is to develop many perspectives to describe a case. That's your sampling there. Okay? Go ahead, sir.
Yeah. I just want to ask, when you are doing those, when you are coming up with those samples, you also consider the sample size, or you just don't?
Yeah, there is consideration of sample size. I think we are going to talk about it as well. Okay. Okay. Thank you. By the way, you'll all get the slides. You'll get the slides. And I think one of the reasons we have got this gentleman is that these slides are put on the system so that people can access them anytime, and you can go through them anytime you want. Okay. What is the purpose of sampling? To describe particularly troublesome or enlightening sample cases. Okay? There's a lady who was doing health studies in here, who is from health. Yes. So, what is the purpose of sampling? Because you want to describe a particularly troublesome issue, such as the prevalence of HIV/AIDS among first-year students in our universities. I mean, it's troubling. It's a big issue, not just for you, but for all of us. And any one of us in this room who is a parent, and you've got, an 18-year-old who is now in university. This is a vexing issue. This is a worrisome issue that you are interested in. Okay? Or you want to study. I mean, there's something that I was reading before I came here because a friend of mine has got a sister who is in hospital. I've never heard of it. Ovarian cancer. And there's a form of ovarian cancer that is not treatable. Okay? I'm sure, I don't know whether many people are aware of it, that there's something called ovarian cancer, and there's ovarian cancer that is not treatable. So a friend of mine is in hospital. I mean, a sister of a friend of mine is in hospital. She is dying, actually. Okay? So you may want to describe a very troublesome issue, such as the prevalence of ovarian cancer among black women, okay? Or the prevalence of prostate cancer among black men. If you're a health person, you know prostate cancer is more common among black men than it is among white men, okay? But you also know, another vexing issue, the prevalence of diabetes, whether it is type 1 or type 2, among people of Indian descent. It's very common among them, compared to those of Caucasian descent or those of us of Negroid descent. Okay? So is it a vexing question? Is it something that is worrying you? Your studies on what again? There you are. There you are. She's studying HIV and the adolescent. So that's a very, very critical issue. Okay? So does that make sense, ma'am? To describe particularly troublesome or enlightening sample cases. It's a case that you want to do. So obviously, you are going into a case study. I think that's the research methodology that's befit your study. You can do something else, but it's mainly a case study. Okay? So you really ought to be very familiar with all the writings on case study. Give me one, please. Give me one. Give me one author. Case studies. Pardon? Yin, Y-I-N. Yin. Another one? Impressive, thank you.
Yeah, she's doing a case study.
Yeah, well, Y-I-N, yeah.
1994.
Yeah. Another one? You see, she's stammering, okay? You see, she's stammering. That's why we are saying you need to read, because there are authors that are well known for their case study approach. So you need to be au fait, you need to be conversant, you need to know at least 3 of those. And you need to be able to read and say, this is where yin is coming from, and this is where so and so is coming from. I prefer the way yin is talking about case studies than the other people for these reasons. But you don't just say for these reasons. You don't just say so. You say because he is coming from this particular epistemological position and this particular ontological position, and these positions help me to understand the phenomena better. Okay? And I'll be much, much closer to the truth. Are we together, colleagues? You have to read, okay? You have to read, yeah? Because if you can't read, it shows that this lady is not reading. Or it shows that this lady is reading, or this gentleman is reading, or this gentleman is not reading, okay? To describe some subgroup, okay? What is the purpose of sampling? The purpose of sampling is to focus on a particular subgroup. I mean, the subgroup that worries me in this institution are the boys and girls that are smoking nyaupe, are the boys and girls that are taking space muffins. I walk around, I actually don't see anybody selling them, but I'm told they're being sold here. I'm sure they sell them right under my nose, but I don't see them. Okay? So you may be interested in describing just a subgroup. Okay? That's the purpose of sampling. The purpose of sampling is that you may be interested in just a small subgroup. And that subgroup is small to medium enterprises. Okay? That subgroup is something to do with policing. Ma'am, what did we say yours was?
Mine is advocacy in mental health, advocating for mental ill patients.
So your subgroup is mental health patients. Okay? So it's a particular case, mental health patients. Okay? Are we together on that slide? Are we together? Okay. Remember, the purpose for this, we are talking about data. That's what we're talking about. We're talking about data. The purpose of this is we're talking about data. We are now unpacking data from a very scientific perspective. We are now beginning to understand data in a much, much deeper form. Okay? We continue. To describe what is typical to those unfamiliar with the case. For instance, a case study of female academics who do research on tissue engineering. We refer to this process as typical sampling. That's your typical sampling. You are interested in a small group for whom to most people this is very unfamiliar. If I say to us in this room, raise your hands for those of you that are familiar with tissue engineering, there may be very few people. Okay? But anybody in this room who is above 50, you notice that your knees are beginning to give up. Okay? And your joints are beginning to become very cranky like mine. Okay? You are not yet there. Okay? You're fine. You're lucky. You're lucky. Okay? So it's to describe what is typical to those unfamiliar with the case. We want to describe the study of female academics that are involved in tissue engineering to those of you that are not familiar with it. So it becomes typical sampling. So when you say, I'm going to do sampling, you ought to tell us what type of sampling you're doing and why are you doing that particular sampling. Does that make sense? We are doing this because you need to justify your sample. Why are you doing that particular sampling procedure? I mean, that's a particular sample, that particular group. Why are you working with? That is the process of making your study scientific, so that it's not just storytelling. Okay, are we together, colleagues? Good. To generate a theory or explore a concept. To generate a theory or explore a concept, we refer to this form of sampling as theory or concept sampling. Theory or a concept sampling. Theory or a concept sampling. Because you want to generate a theory. Okay? I'm not going to ask how many people have read the book, A Theory of Scientific Revolutions by Thomas Kuhn. Okay? I'm not going to ask. But one day I'll meet you in the corridor and say, what did Thomas Kuhn say in that particular book? And then, you run away from me. That's fine. You won't be the first person to run away from me. Okay? Thomas Kuhn, A Theory of Scientific Revolutions. That book is an e-book, and that book is easily available. But you must read it. When you read that book, you can actually begin to feel that I am now learning something new. I'm now a different person intellectually than what I was last year or 5 years ago when I did my bachelor's degree. So it's Thomas Kuhn, A Theory of Scientific Revolutions. You cannot go and talk at a workshop, at a conference on research about theory in research and you haven't read Thomas Kuhn. People will destroy you completely. Because they will say that lady doesn't know what she's talking about. Or that gentleman doesn't know what he's talking about. Because you haven't read, you are unable to understand and to expatiate how theories change, how paradigms change. Okay? So in your discourse, the word paradigm becomes very critical. The word paradigm becomes very critical. And as you speak with your colleagues, you need to begin to understand and begin to use it more often so that you understand what paradigms are. So Thomas Kuhn is talking about paradigmatic change. That's very? He
says it's a structure of scientific
revolutions by Thomas Kuhn. The Kuhn, is it K-H-U-N or K-U-H-N? Fedi? K-U-H-N. Okay. You see, this is why I always wonder, why people say, I can't remember this topic, I don't know this topic. You can quickly go onto your phone and Google, and the information comes. So I'm jealous of you and I envy you, because everything is on your palm. And if you're not able to do it, it's just that you're adults. I would have used one word, which I would normally use with my students, but you're not my students, you're my colleagues, all of you. Okay? Because if you don't read extensively, it shows. It shows in your analysis. It shows very easily when you analyze something that, no, this gentleman hasn't read. Okay? So if you read Thomas Kuhn, the structure of what, Fedi? The structure of revolutions. Yeah, it's a very famous, it's a classic. It was written in the 60s, actually, I think. It's a classic, okay? Thank you. So let's go back. Let's go back. What is the purpose of sampling? To generate a theory or explore a concept. I think you need to go to your dictionaries and try to understand what is a concept. It's not that simple. What is a concept? You need to go back to your dictionary. What is a concept? What is a conceptual schema? What is a conceptual framework? What is the difference between a concept and an idea, for instance? That was my famous question for exams in research methodology. What is the difference between a concept and an idea? Okay, but you need to find that on your own. But I really want to go back to this. What is the purpose of sampling? To generate a theory or explore a concept. We refer to this form of sampling as theory or a concept sampling. For instance, we may want to generate a theory about the introduction of a blended mode of teaching and learning among first-year engineering students at the VUT. We want to develop a theory of that, okay? Or my colleague in HR, he may want to develop a theory of individual performance management systems in the VUT or in higher education. you may want to develop a theory in that area. Okay, are we together, colleagues? So we step out of this. Okay, sampling, there is also sampling after data collection is started. There is also sampling after data collection is started. There is sampling after data collection is started. Okay, because you may discover that, I'm not getting everything I want. So you go back to sampling again, okay? That's opportunistic sampling. Takes place after you have already started data collection. You may want to take part of opportunities that may now exist, which didn't exist then. Okay? Example, investigating the financial causes of fees must fall. Investigating the financial causes of hashtag fees may fall. You may discover that the major cause is actually the role of national parties after you have started. You may think, these students are just saying we want more, we want free education. But you may then discover and say, no, like what most of us are discovering right now, that no. This has absolutely nothing to do with fees. It's a small reason. This is a national agenda. This is a national political agenda. This is a titanic battle between the three political parties, the ANC, the DA, and the EFF. If that's your party, please don't feel offended. If you belong to any one of these three parties, don't feel offended. But I'm just giving you an example that you may want to be investigating fees must fall. And you think, okay, it's just poor students. It's poor students who cannot afford higher education who are pushing this agenda. And then you discover and say, no. This is really about the national politics, who becomes president and which party becomes the party of government in future. Okay? So there you are, sampling after data collection is started. It's called opportunistic sampling. Yes, Freddy?
Prof, does that mean basically some phenomena that has occurred after you did your sampling design?
And you were not aware of it.
And it's relevant.
Yes, and it's relevant. This is a very good example. This is a very, very good example. That I want to study fees must fall. And the main reason for me for fees must fall is poor students who cannot afford fees. Or the middle class that used to afford fees but cannot afford fees anymore. Yet in actual fact, I just discovered now that no. This is a political issue. Because when students talk to us as management, some of them talk openly. They say, our political structure in this region has said. Our political structure in this region has said this is what we must do. Okay. Are we together? Yes, ma'am? No, it's addition. It's an addition to make your earlier sampling stronger. To make your earlier sampling procedure stronger. It's an addition that, remember, the purpose of research is the quest for truth. The purpose for research is the quest for truth. Okay? Professor Molloy will know that one of our famous phrases in the mid-1990s, I don't know whether it's a vision or it's the motto for is it Panasonic? I can't remember. The quest for zero defect. Okay? Or Avis, we are driven. So the journey is not over. So the purpose of research is the quest for truth. That's why it is a science. Because we want to continue to push our boundaries, to push knowledge here. Okay, are we together, colleagues? Are we together? Uh-huh. In the quantitative research methodologies, you can use that as well. But remember, your logic of reasoning becomes deductive. You are coming from theory to prove or disprove a hypothesis. Whereas here is the inductive logic. The logic of reasoning is very different, and what you want to achieve is very different. Here, we want to understand this particular case, In the quantitative research methodology, we want to see whether we can generalize. Okay, good. Okay? Sampling after data collection is started. If you want to explore certain cases in depth that have emerged during your study, this process of sampling is referred to as disconfirming or confirming cases. Okay? Let's go back. If you want to explore certain cases in depth, for instance, the impact of individual performance management systems among academics, you want to explore it deeper. If you want to explore the case of individual performance management systems among academics, certain things will have emerged which you didn't know. This process is called sampling, is referred to as it's a confirming or disconfirming. Okay? And we can pick a few things that can come after IPMS, for instance, once we've introduced IPMS. Okay? That, for instance, some people no longer support it because the financial reward is not adequate. Okay? Because we do individual performance management systems to give people some little bit of money because they've scored 4 out of 5, but also to promote them because they've gotten 4 out of 5. In most cases, it's for promotion. There's no monetary value attached to it. Okay? But you may then discover that, people are not interested in this because the amount of money you're giving them, it doesn't make any difference anyway. Okay? So that's your confirming. If you are investigating retention strategies in engineering at the VUT, you may realize that the problem starts much earlier at school where students were not taught geometry. Therefore, you may want to probe this aspect in your sample. There's a good example that I thought about this morning. Okay? Let's go up there. If you want to explore certain cases in depth that have emerged during your research study. So when you were investigating retention strategies of engineering students at the VUT, you thought it is because the lecturers are not teaching well. You thought because they don't have equipment or engineering drawing equipment. You thought the classes were not good. But something then hits you and he says, no, you're backing the wrong horse. Go back and see what these kids were taught in school. Some of them never did geometry. So that's why they've got problems with engineering drawing. Okay, does that make sense? Are we together? Okay.
With this confirming and confirming cases, does it happen that maybe you have to have the same sample that you had to go for this in-depth?
Yes, you can remain with the same sample. But remember, initially you just wanted to understand the retention strategies. Maybe people were not teaching well. But now we've discovered something that this very same sample, the problem started at school. So you go back and say, which school did you go to? Which school did you go to? I mean, what type of school did you go to? What type of school did you go to? So you'll notice that most of them would have come to either from, poor township schools or poor rural schools. They were not taught geometry. There were no geometry teachers. The teachers did not understand geometry. So that's why they're coming now to do engineering drawing. They have no skills in geometry. And that's why they're failing. And it's actually a true story. We've got 1,086 students that registered for a course in engineering called engineering drawing. 800 of them failed last year. So it's actually a true story. Somebody had a hand somewhere. Yeah, except in quantitative studies, your samples have to be large. That's what Professor Molloy was saying. Your samples have to be big.
You can then use Popper's falsification.
Say Popper.
Popper's falsification theory.
Okay, she has just said Popper. Popper's falsification theory. Again, I'm not going to say raise your hands. Those of us that have read Karl Popper, K-A-R-L, is a philosopher. So please read Karl Popper, because that's philosophy. Okay? K-A-R-L. Popper is P-O-P-P-E-R. He's a British philosopher. P-O-P-P-E-R is a British philosopher. I know some of you may say, but this young man keeps giving us books to read. The moment you read some of these books, you have your own aha moment on your own at home. To say, yes, I was failing to understand this thing. There is the answer. There is Popper's, classification theory. It makes sense. Okay. Ma'am, we come back to you. Start your question again.
I was saying, as you were elaborating on it, I was now trying to think of an example where I can have this confirming or a confirming sampling in an experimental setting.
Okay. And what has been said is that you can look at, in fact, you can just Google right now, Popper's false classification theory. It will pop up. It will really pop up. You just Google it, it will pop up. But I suggest that you actually read Karl Popper. And I'm sure his books are now e-books and probably very, very cheap. There you are. Okay. Okay. Let us be personal now. Let us be personal now, and we blame Fedi. Let us be personal now, and we blame my brother Fedi then. There is no way you can become a scholar. There is no way you can become a scholar if on your bedside there are no books there. You can't. You can't. There is no way you can become a scholar. And on your bedside, I don't know what you call those things, because a bed, there's a bed and a mattress, but it has a headboard. And the headboard has got a place that you put a lamp and a picture of your daughter. And it's called what? Yes. There is no way you can become a scholar when there are no books on those two things. It's not possible. Why? Because, why? Where do you get time to read them? If you've got e-books, yes, that's fine. Then you Google. That's why I'm jealous of you. Because you've got e-books, and life has been made a lot easier for you. You can see mine. It shows that it has been read many, many times. Okay? You can see that it has been read many, many times. But I'm old-fashioned because I want to highlight it. Okay? In e-books, you see, he's telling me something that I didn't even think of. Yes. You see. I can even fold the pages, eh? Okay. I didn't know that too.
And it's coming from a very young man.
Yes.
But the difference is that you're not touching it.
There you are, you see.
And you're not smelling it. You want to smell the book. You're not smelling it.
To smell the age of the book.
Okay. Okay.
You want to smell it as well.
Thank you. But the import of what we're all saying is that if you want to become a scholar, you must really read extensively. Not just in your field of endeavor, but in different fields as well, so that you can understand, okay? But let's come back to this, okay? But notice what we're trying to do, because most of us thought sampling is a very easy thing. Sampling is a very simple thing. Sampling is a very common thing. You can just do a sample. Eh? No, you don't. You have got to follow certain procedures. It's a scientific process. Okay? So before we leave this one, sampling after data collection has started. If you want to explore certain cases in depth that have emerged during your research study, this process of sampling is referred to as disconfirming or confirming cases. If you are investigating retention strategies in engineering at the VUT, you may realize that the problem started much earlier at school, where these students were not taught geometry. Therefore, you may want to probe this aspect in your sample. That very same sample, check whether they were taught geometry. Okay, that will make your study richer. Okay. You may start data collection in a case study of the prevalence of HIV/AIDS among 20-year-old married mothers. In the process, you may realize that instead of focusing on married women, you may want to focus on unmarried 20-year-old mothers as well. This is referred to as snowball sampling in both qualitative and quantitative research methods. So you have your answer, ma'am. Okay? But what excites me about this myself, and you can see I'm excited, is because sampling is not your Mickey Mouse stuff. You know, it's not something like a Coke Zero or a Fanta. You know, it's not that common. It's something that you need to think about. You need to be involved in a scientific process. You have to have a scientific thought that you have got to think about. It's not something that you can shoot from the hip. Okay? That's what makes this fascinating. That's what makes research fascinating. That's what makes research science. Remember we said research is disciplined inquiry. It is a science. It is disciplined inquiry because you are doing all these things even according to your own sample. Okay. Are we together? There was somebody with a question. Fed, you wanted to say something?
No, that explains snowballing for me better.
Yeah, okay. That's it, okay? But this is exciting because we are beginning to understand that sampling is not something wishy-washy. It's a solid discipline. It's a solid affair. It's a solid issue that you need to take seriously. That's why you find when your research professor or a research lecturer or senior lecturer marks your proposal, they say, there's nothing here. There's no evidence that you have read. You are lucky you're not my student, because if you are my student, I would say because I go first to your bibliography. If I don't see certain classical works, I say, ma'am, please go redo this. You haven't done anything. Okay? Then I can explain to you what I mean. Okay? But there you are. Before we leave it, in the process, you may realize that instead of focusing on married women, you may want to focus on unmarried 20-year-old mothers as well. This is referred to as snowball sampling in both qualitative and quantitative research methods. Okay? Are we together, colleagues? Good. Then sampling size. Always remember that in qualitative research methods, the focus is on an in-depth study of a case. Qualitative research methods is in-depth. So if it is in-depth, if you've got a very large sample, you may have a challenge. You may have a problem. But what I love about it, because it's an in-depth study, you know, you've got an opportunity to focus on this, on small to medium enterprises, whether it's women or it's men. You've got an opportunity to go deep in it. You've got an opportunity, the word we normally use, you have to immerse yourself. You have to immerse yourself. I don't know whether it's capital M or 1M. You have to immerse yourself. You immerse yourself among the people that you're studying. You go in there. If I want to study the way my friend, they've come up with IPMS, I actually have to work among all the HR people, talk to them, hear what they're saying. But when I talk to them, it's something that I've already constructed. I've got a question that I ask them because it's a scientific process. Okay? So we are saying, always remember that in qualitative research methods, the focus is on an in-depth study of a case. It is possible to study one case. For instance, a case study of an artist. Okay? A case study of retention strategies in teaching mathematics at VUT. A case study of HIV/AIDS prevention among pregnant mothers. Focus could be on 40 as a case study. But remember, if your sample is big, you may get into trouble. That's why you then find some people are taking 3 years to do a research study. Margaret Mead, the famous one, spent so many years in Samoa, in the islands of Samoa, studying people. Okay, it wasn't a year, it's more than a year. Or most of us, we all remember that woman who was studying gorillas in Eastern Africa. She took years to study them. And right now, I've just seen there's another woman who's studying gorillas in the East African forest, because they are saying, for us to be able to stop the occurrence of Ebola, we must vaccinate the chimpanzees and the gorillas as well. But how do you do it? Okay, there's a woman now, that's going to be her lifetime passion, making sure that these animals are vaccinated so that they don't pass the, what do you call it, Ebola? The virus, so that they don't pass the virus to people, like what he did in Liberia, in Sierra Leone, in Guinea, etc., etc. Okay? So make sure that you have a sample size that is doable. Don't take a big sample, because if you take a big sample, then you've got a problem. Okay? Mm-hmm. Good?
In terms of, let's say perhaps you're working on an auto-ethnographic case study, from an artistic point of view, how does sampling actually work?
He uses a fantastic term, auto-ethnography. Are we all familiar with auto-ethnography? We are familiar with. Okay, most people are familiar with. So ask your question again.
In terms of working with auto-ethnography, how does sampling work from an artistic point of view?
For instance, okay, let's hear others. Prof, you can start.
The fact that you are saying auto, what does it mean? Cell. You are studying your cell. So who's the sample?
There you are. Excellent. Yeah.
So then you will have to reason why you're using that person for whatever. So that's when what Prof was saying about critiquing who you're using. So whether it's relevant within your study to help you produce or whatever the case might be.
The question is not as such what the sample is how do you go about it?
How do you go about it? How do you go about it? Excellent question. There's another word that we're not using. There's another word that we're not using. When you do an autoethnography, you are trying to do a reflexive study. You're trying to do a reflexive study. You're looking inwards. You're looking inwards and trying to understand why you behave the way you behave. Okay? And who is the best known author for reflexive sociology? The best well-known author? Pierre Bourdieu. B-O-U-R-D-I-E-U. Okay? Okay? Pierre Bourdieu. Auto is as in motor cars. A-U-T, auto ethnography. Ethnography. Okay? Auto ethnography. But he then needs, remember research, when we say what is research, is the quest for truth. So he has to go deeper into issues that talk to science so that his autoethnographic study can bring out the results that he wants. Okay? Ladies and gentlemen, I notice our time is running out, but let me move a little bit faster, okay? I think we have probably about 10 more slides to come, okay? We'll be finished now. Sampling size, but that's a fantastic study. Go and read Pierre Bourdieu. Pierre Bourdieu. It's actually Bourdieu and Wankart. There are two authors, but just Google Bourdieu, Pierre Bourdieu. P-I-E-R-R-E. Pierre is Peter, obviously, okay? Let's just go back. Always remember that in qualitative research methods, the focus is on an in-depth study of a case because you need to immerse yourself in the site that you're studying. Okay? So let's go to the next slide. Our main data collection methods. Main data collection methods are observations, very simple. Documents and audiovisual materials, very simple. Interviews and questionnaires. Those are your main methods of data collection if you're doing a qualitative research study, okay? Observations, interviews, documents, and visual materials. Okay? But when you are doing autoethnography, then it becomes a different ballgame altogether in terms of how you collect that data. Because you have to look at yourself reflexively. Okay, you have to look at yourself reflexively. So are we together? It's observations, it's interviews and questionnaires, it's documents and audio-visual materials. Okay, because you can just focus on documents only. You can focus on documents as a source. I mean, if you go to the Nelson Mandela Foundation in somewhere in Houghton, there's so many documents there about apartheid. I was shocked when I went there that one of the substances that they were using during that time to poison people, it's called paraquat. Paraquat is a weed killer. I didn't even know that you can use it to kill people. But there's so many documents there that you find on how people were being killed in the past. Okay, so you can use documents, so it becomes a documentary based research study. Okay. For instance, there's now a new law in higher education that has come, and I was talking to somebody that maybe what we need to do is to do a research study on this thing, but we just focus on that document, which is the Gazette that came from Parliament. We just focus on the Gazette as our main source of data. Okay, good. Mm-hmm.
I understand the distinction between your primary, as far as documents are concerned, primary sources and secondary. Now, your Gazette, I suppose it would be primary.
It is primary because it is the original one.
Now, if you have your secondary sources, because there's an issue here, whether would you then say that your research is empirical or conceptual? You're relying on documents.
There's another term that we haven't used a lot. It's empiricism. Empiricism. Okay? Empiricism. The difference between quantitative and qualitative research methods is that the quantitative research methods is very positivistic. Why is it positivistic? It uses the methods of the natural sciences to generate truth. Because I'm born and bred in a village, so I'll give you an example that I know so well. If I want to know how to produce more maize in my field, I have two. One, I put fertilizer. The other, I don't put fertilizer. I plant my maize, and see what is the result. That's empirical. That's empiricism. So you'll find the people that oppose qualitative research methods, they'll say it is not empirical. So what we are doing is to make sure that you answer that question. How do you answer that question? You answer that question by showing that you were very rigorous, even in your sampling procedures. You were very rigorous, even in your defining what sample that you wanted to study. So you were scientific, because for most people, scientism is empiricism. If it's not empirical, therefore it is not scientific. But we're now knowing that even an autoethnographic study where he goes into reflexive sociology becomes scientific as well, becomes empirical. So your question is, what is empiricism? What is empirical? Okay, Prof, go ahead.
And also maybe that one would say then we are using the five senses in order to prove.
Okay? But it's how you use data. We are going to use the primary source, and the primary source is the Gazette. We may also want to go and interview the lawmakers themselves so that we go deeper to the truth. Because the purpose of research is the quest for truth. It's a science because we want to reach at the truth objectively. But you all know that if you're not doing quantitative research methods, people say, this is hogwash. I mean, there's no objectivity here. Because the difference between qualitative studies and quantitative studies at another level is the whole question of objectivism. And positivism. And positivism. That's the debate. Okay, thanks.
And the secondary sources would be people that have studied
Exactly. Yeah, but thank you. You raise it's a very fundamental issue. This is the epistemological and ontological battle between the two. It's a titanic battle. It's a war. Okay, it's a war. In some other countries, like in the US now, if it's not empirical, meaning quantitative, then it's not science. Then we are not going to take in your recommendations. We won't. But we all know that battle is not just about number crunching. That battle becomes ideological as well.
And hence now there's this indigenous research methods, which says we are neither qualitative or quantitative. We want to do it from an indigenous perspective.
Okay?
What was that term you used?
Indigenous.
Yeah, but then you said, was it normative?
No, I said it is, we are neither qualitative or quantitative, but we are saying we don't want these Western methodologies. We want them to decolonization, indigenous.
Okay.
Is that still the same as pragmatism?
No. No.
Decolonization, indigenous.
Okay. The argument is knowledge. I want you to listen carefully, please. Knowledge is not ahistorical. Knowledge is not apolitical. Knowledge is not neutral. Knowledge is loaded ideologically. Knowledge is loaded philosophically. Knowledge is loaded because of where I'm coming from in terms of my race, in terms of my gender, in terms of my sexuality. Does that make sense? Okay? It's because what we say is that I talk the way I talk because of my history and where I'm coming from. I may have learned certain things in the process, but where I came from fundamentally structures the way I think and the way I do things. Okay? And always go back to my mother was a washerwoman, my father was a gardener. He may drive the biggest BMW, but that still structures his thought. And the fact that he's black, and the fact that he is male. We all know, because we are a patriarchal society. We all know because we are a patriarchal society. I'll give you an example that, you laugh because I don't want to give an example. Some of you may be very offended. When my daughter first married, and when they wanted to buy a car, she would say to the husband, let's check with daddy. What will daddy say when we buy this car? It's because patriarchy was complete in her head. It was taught her. She couldn't divorce herself from her father. So if they want to buy a car, she says, okay, sweetheart, why don't you ask my father? He knows these things better than you. Okay. So knowledge is not apolitical, ahistorical, or neutral. It is ideologically loaded. It is history loaded. Okay? Okay, thank you. Please just be patient. We are almost there. Observations and participate. So we are now looking at observations as a general method. So when you are doing observations, you can be a participant observer. In other words, you take place, you interact with the people, you are immersed in their environment. You can be a non-participant observer. You just go and watch and don't say anything. You could choose to spend more time as a participant or as an observer. In other words, you are immersed in what people are doing. Like that little boy, he's here, but he's immersed in what we're doing in this class. Okay? And you could start as an outsider and later on become an insider as a participant in terms of data collection. Okay? So when you talk about data collection methods, especially observations, it's not simple observation. It follows a particular scientific process because we are still with the debate of empiricism, okay, and objectivism, and what is science and what is not science. Okay? So colleagues, there you are. Observations, participant observation, you're a participant observer. You can be a non-participant observer. You could choose to spend more time as a participant or as an observer. You could start as an outsider and later on as an insider, or you could start as an insider and then later on as an outsider in terms of your methodology of collecting data, in terms of your methodology of collecting qualitative data. In terms of your methodology, we'll come to the definition that you wanted the other day, ethnography and phenomenology. Okay? That's why it is called autoethnography. That's why it is autoethnography. Okay? Thank you. Let's move on. Then you've got interviews and questionnaires. General note, always have small numbers because you're doing qualitative research. Always have small numbers. Then types of interviews. Open-ended structured interviews, we all know that. Open-ended unstructured interviews. Semi-structured interviews. All these can be recorded or you take notes. And remember, when you take notes, you have to take notes in a particular way in qualitative research to be able to use different, like NVivo or Atlas TI. So you have to take your notes in a particular way. You don't just take the notes like somebody's taking minutes, in a meeting. They have to be done. You have to do a proper coding as well. Okay? So let me move on first. Always seek participants' consent for interviews. Don't just go and interview. In fact, you all know you have to have your ethical clearance before you move anywhere. Okay? Good. I'm moving a little bit faster because our time is off. Both research and participant to keep a journal. I think I want to say both researcher and participant to keep a journal. So you ask your participants to keep a journal and you keep your journal. Your cell phone or a computer is a very big asset. Okay? So I'm talking of what documents, policies, what Tebogo was talking about, policies, acts, government gazettes, etc., etc. Autobiographies, autoethnographies, and biographies. Portfolios, electronic data, and emails. Those are sources of data as well. Okay? Audiovisual materials. Those of us that are doing art, visual arts. Okay? So documents as a source of information. So all these, but this list is not exhaustive. This list is not exhaustive. Nowadays, you can use even Facebook as a source of information. You can use, if you want to study how some presidents mess up their countries, you can study Trump and Twitter. You go on his Twitter account and you see whatever he said. Okay? Okay. We are almost coming there. Visual images as a source of data. There you are, my colleagues that are in visuals. Visual images as a source of data. Okay? The rise of visual ethnography. So there's something now called visual ethnography. And that's what some of you are interested in. Okay? Photo elicitation. Photo elicitation. I mean, remember Rod Stewart, every picture tells a story. Well, I'm showing you my age now. Okay? Some of you don't even know who Rod Stewart is. Okay? But some people say they do. Thank you. At least I don't feel that young. Okay? Photo elicitation. Every picture tells a story. I mean, I like to look at these old pictures from the 30s and 40s and 20s, what people wore. And I like to look at them because they tell a story. They tell you something about the history of that time, of that era. Okay? Visual images as an aid memoir. An aid memoir is like a summary. That's a French word. An aid memoir is like a summary. If you're doing some work, people always want an executive summary or an aid memoir before they go into the bigger document. Because an executive summary says everything about your document. An aid memoir says everything about what you want to do. Okay? So they're saying visual images, a visual images. I mean, if you, now you can see this is my interest. If you pick the Drum of 1960, the Drum magazine of 1960, I'll read about Spokesmarshal, I'll read about District 6 in Cape Town, and I'll read about that small area in Johannesburg that's very, Sophia Town. I'll read about Sophia Town. I just get extrapolated into the past. Sophia Town, the jazz in Sophia Town. District 6, the jazz in District 6. Okay? And he can even talk about Sharpeville. Remember, Vereeniging was Uptown. It was called Uptown in the 60s. That's what Vereeniging was called. Some people don't even know, so I know something you don't know, okay? Okay, so visual images as an aid memoir, as a source of data, and as prompts for discussion, something that prompts you to discuss something, okay? Remember Mr. Peter Ngubane, he's my favorite drum. This magazine is a rich source of data for the struggle in South Africa. It's an aid memoir. I get everything from one drum edition of, say, January 1, 1962. I get everything I want from that magazine of January 1, 1962. It's an aid memoir. It gives me an entree into the apartheid struggle during that period. And so I can use it as a source of data. Okay, that's what we're talking about. Ah, okay. Yeah. Put simply, it gives me a way of getting into, it's much broader than just enter. I'm getting into something, but with all the nuances, with all the details. I mean, when I read Drum of 1961, I get goosebumps, you know. I get goosebumps. What I read in there. Did this actually happen? Yes, it happened. I mean, because I'm interested in music, I'm interested in jazz. You know, I'm Spox Mashane, the flute, I can see him on his. When I read, I can actually begin to hear him sing and speak. But he died long time ago, okay? So it's giving me, I'm entering into Spox Mashane's world, apartheid South Africa struggle world through Peter Magumbane's pictures and stories, okay? So it's a summary. I don't even have to have been there, okay? Then comments from our visual, I thought we had time so that those colleagues from visual arts will give us comments, but we don't have time now. You can give us comments next time. What is ethnography? It is a research process common to. It is a research process germane to. It is a research process usually used with. That's germane to, okay? So it is a research process germane to qualitative research methods in which the researcher immerses herself in the social setting in which she is studying or observing. Does that make sense? That's ethnography, okay? So when you do autoethnography, my friend, you are immersing yourself, in your own world. That's why it's reflexive, okay? Phenomenology refers to a philosophy that is concerned with the question of how individuals make sense of their world around them, and how in particular the philosopher or a researcher should bracket out, should remove preconceptions concerning his or her grasp of that world. There's your answer, sir. That's phenomenology. A phenomenological study is a study in which the researcher immerses herself or himself among the people that he or she is studying, whether they are students or whether they are people that own SMEs or whether they're artists, you immerse yourself, okay? But you bracket your preconceptions about how visual artists behave or do their work, about how people that own small to medium enterprises think, about how nurses think. I get immersed in them, but I bracket out all those preconceptions so that I begin to understand what they're doing, okay? Does that make sense, ladies and gentlemen? Okay, so when you go home and you say, when you go home tonight and you say, honey, what you're talking about is really not phenomenological, you know? Okay, yeah, we're almost there, please, just bear with me. The actual process of observing, we are almost there, the actual process of observing. The site should help to investigate the central phenomenon. The site should help, we're almost there, please. The site should help to investigate the central phenomenon. Professor Malloy always talks about that. What is your central phenomenon? If you're writing your thesis, your central phenomenon should guide you throughout. The central phenomenon should be obvious to the reader that this is your central phenomenon. Okay? The prevalence of HIV/AIDS among 20-year-olds. Okay? The use, I mean, in visual arts, for instance, this Japanese guy I've seen now, he uses pumpkins to show the notion of infinity. Okay? So pumpkins become part of his central phenomenon. Okay? What is your central phenomenon? You must ask yourselves right now, what is my central phenomenon in my study? And you must think seriously about it, okay? Identify who or what to observe and for how long. Identify who or what to observe and for how long. Determine initially your role as an observer. What is your role as an observer? What is your role as an observer? Okay, I'm just whizzing through. Yeah, we're almost there. The actual process of observing. What is your role as an observer? The importance, there you are, multiple observations. What word do we normally use for multiple observations? It starts with a T. Triangulation. Triangulation. Okay? Multiple observation is triangulation, going back and forth. It's almost reflexive as well. Okay? How are you going to take field notes? How are you going to take field notes? Okay? Yeah, we're almost there, colleagues. The actual process again. Make a decision on information to be recorded. You must record. Record your own reflective field notes. Decide on being an obtrusive or unobtrusive observer. Unobtrusive, you go in there, you don't disturb the setting. People continue to do what they are doing. Okay? Interviews, always remember, one-on-one interviews, focus group interviews, telephone interviews, electronic email interviews, clarity and elaboration. Okay, that's fairly straightforward, okay? But these are ways in which you can interview. Okay, let's move on. We are almost there. Key issues to consider and think about before starting the process. Ethical considerations, common. How you access a site or participants. How do you access that site? Okay? The observation protocol. You must have an observation protocol so that you follow a scientific process. How you design your interview protocol. There are ways to design your interview protocol. How you collect documents and audiovisual materials. There must be a scientific way in which you do these things. You can't just do it randomly. Data analysis in quantitative research methods. Okay. Key issues to consider and think about before starting the process. You've got to think about ethical considerations, how you access a site and participants, your observation protocol. How are you going to observe? You don't just go there and say, I'm observing. You must think and plan your observation, how you design your interview protocol, how you collect documents and audiovisual materials. Okay. Data analysis in quantitative research methods. Remember, data analysis in quantitative and qualitative are very different, okay? So you need to be talking of analytical induction, grounded theory, use of Atlas TI and in vivo. I love this one. This is just fantastic, grounded theory. That you have got to develop your own theory from the ground upwards. Who is the well-known author for grounded theory? Who is the well-known author for grounded theory? Anselm Strauss. A. Strauss. S-T-R-A-U-S-S. S-T-R-A-U-S-S. And now Strauss writes with his student, Shamaz. Okay? So go Google Strauss. S-T-R-A. Every one of you in this room, there is no way you are going to write a qualitative research method study and you don't talk about Anselm Strauss. If you don't talk about Strauss, if you happen to be so unfortunate that I'm asked to be the external examiner, I'll say, please send this thing back. The researcher and the student didn't do any work at all. Okay? That's what I will say. So Anselm Strauss, okay? Yeah, we're almost there. We're almost there. We'll talk some other time about analytic induction and how to use. The library normally has workshops on Atlas TI. Please attend those workshops, okay? Okay, so we're almost there. What is analytic induction? It is an approach to the analysis of qualitative data in which the researcher seeks universal explanations of phenomena by pursuing the collection of data until no cases that are inconsistent with a hypothetical explanation, which means deviant or negative cases, or phenomena are found, when you've done everything and you are happy that there is no other case out there. Okay, that's your analytic induction. Okay. Yeah, we're almost there. There is the process of analytic induction. Rough definition of a research question, hypothetical explanation of a research question, examination of cases, deviant cases are not conforming, hypothetical explanation, no deviant cases, hypothesis confirmed, hypothetical explanation redefined to exclude deviant case, reformulate hypothesis, end of examination cases, data collection ceases. There you are. Okay. But if we had more time, we would go into each one of those boxes and expatiate those boxes. Hold on, ladies. We're almost there. Hold on, hold on, hold on. Okay. I think we're almost there. There you are. Thank you. Okay.